Hello, my name is Chris Bagg, and my favorite thing is tabletop role-playing games.
Welcome to the Finding Favorites podcast, where we explore your favorite things without using an algorithm. Here's your host, Leah Jones.
Hello, and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones, and this is the podcast where we get recommendations without using an algorithm. I did it backwards. Hello, and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones. This is the podcast where we learn about people's favorite things and get recommendations without using an algorithm. I am here today with the other half of the Upper Middlebrow podcast, Chris Bagg. Chris has been an actor, a cook, a teacher, a professional triathlete, a gym teacher for adults, and a writer. If he's not reading a book, writing, or teaching other adults how to be better endurance athletes, you can find him riding a bike, cross-country skiing, cooking, or playing some kind of game. He has learned at this point in life that he is not a jock, that he is a jock nerd, and there is nothing wrong with that. Chris, how are you?
I'm good. It's nice to be living the jock nerd life today. I went for a ski this morning, and now I'm going to talk to you about Dungeons and Dragons.
Perfect. Great, because I this morning got off of a flight I took a red eye home from LA, which was a huge mistake. Occasionally you book a red eye and you think it's such a great way to use your time, but it's fine. It's a great way to use your time. It's a horrible thing to do to your body.
Yeah, it always seems like a good idea on the front end, and then all it ends up doing is destroying 2 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But because I got home at 5 this morning, I was able to see a matinee of Dungeons and Dragons, the new movie.
Oh my God, I'm so jealous.
Yeah. So you haven't seen it yet?
I have not seen it. I got a picture from my sister and my nephew. I play a remote game with my niece and my nephew, which is one of the abiding joys of my life.
Yeah.
So I got a sort of smug picture from my nephew. That was essentially the message of which was like, I'm seeing this and I'm pretty sure you haven't yet.
He's like, what are you doing? Skiing?
But did you go and see it out of your own interest, or was that preparation for this podcast?
I have a friend I see a lot of movies with, and a few months ago we saw Wakanda Forever in 4DX, which is where the chair moves. The fourth dimension, the chair is moving.
I love that they're like, we're going to get rid of the normal fourth dimension, which is just time.
Yes.
We're going to ignore that is a thing and be like, you know what? Time doesn't exist when you come and do 4DX. It's the chair that moves.
So we have been looking for another movie to see in 4DX that wouldn't be... Wakanda Forever was maybe too emotional to see in essentially a 2-hour roller coaster. So we've been looking for kind of an action, fun comic book movie that would have a different emotional stake, so we wouldn't feel like assholes if we were laughing because the chair was making us laugh.
Got it. Yes, I could see that. And especially with Wakanda Forever and, the emotional history of the actors as well. I imagine that was a jarring experience, literally and figuratively, I guess.
Yeah. Wasn't a great movie we had never done a 4DX movie before. Mm-hmm. So we didn't know that our reaction would be laughing. And the first time you feel like your chair move is they're in. Did you see Wakanda Forever?
I have not,
okay.
But I know, yeah.
But Chadwick has passed away, and they don't pretend he hasn't in the movie. So it's an opening scene in the lab, and they're talking about his sudden. He has just passed away, and his sister is trying to make a cure. But as she walks across the lab, your chair's like boom, 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 boom. And we start giggling, and it's not appropriate.
Yep. Yeah, that would be... Well, I mean, it's I don't know. It's like you're going to see... It's like trying to watch a serious movie when you're in a motel with a Magic Fingers bed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little
exactly. We have just been watching a little bit more carefully what comes, because it's just one theater in all of Chicago that does it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always a movie you want to see at all. And Dungeons and Dragons has been getting really good reviews. And so yeah. So I don't know. I see a few movies a month.
Mm-hmm.
So it had good reviews, and we could see it with the special chairs.
Nice. Well, I've never heard of 4DX before this, so you've enlarged my world, which is awesome. That's great.
If you enjoy roller coasters or haunted houses, and don't get motion sick on long car rides when you're the passenger, then it's great. And actually, it was better. There are a lot of scenes in this one where it's kind of got a floaty feeling to it, where the chair's kind of like floating as they come into a new like a new scene or new land. And there's just a lot of really nice, like, floaty scenes. So it's fun.
Nice. Well, I will see if there's a 4DX experience in Portland. And I'm sure I have a Friday night gaming group that was off this past week. I'm guessing that we will all try to make an effort to go and see it together. But what did you think? Did it it sounds like you kind of liked it. Did it enlarge your sense of what Dungeons and Dragons is?
It's an absolute blast. It is a very fun movie. You can tell the almost like the personality of the players at the table come through the characters. You can tell when, I know enough about Dungeons and Dragons to know that you have like dexterity and luck. You have like levels, and then you roll a die, and I know enough. I played in my 20s briefly with some friends, and so you could tell that there were scenes where you're like, oh, that they rolled a 20. Like, that was just like luck and dexterity, and the spell were like, it just all worked for them. And it also felt like a real celebration of people who are neurodivergent.
Nice. Great.
Where
That's awesome.
you can tell also that some of the, I don't know, just watching it, I was like, oh, that person they're being played without judgment as someone with autism, or they're being played without judgment as someone with ADHD. And there's one person who's like neurotypical, who's being like sarcastic, and other players are like, why are you lying? He's like, I'm not lying, I'm being sarcastic. And I'm like, there's some of that stuff that I found really well done in a way that kind of celebrates, I think, who's really at the table in a lot of Dungeons and Dragons crews.
Totally. Yeah. I'm really happy to hear that because for everything I've heard about the movie is that, first of all, it's good and it's fun and it's enjoyable, which is great because this is always a chance to get more people involved in the hobby because it is a beautiful hobby. But one amazing thing about the gaming community is that it is a community of people who, for most of their life, have been othered, have been made fun of, who've been excluded. And it's only in the past like 5 or 8 years that playing role-playing games has become, like socially acceptable and cool. And so it's this community of people who have, who really understand what it feels like to be othered. And it's a pretty remarkable place. Like any subculture, it has its trolls. It has its it has its not so great sides to it. There is plenty of toxic BS. I don't know if I can swear on here.
But you can swear, yeah.
Marvelous. But it is really this kind of marvelous place where where everything is accepted because it's a world where like everything is made up. It's role-playing games are like, it's cowboys and Indians, but there's a system to figure out if you I actually shot you. yeah, so it is all made up. And so why can't we also be super inclusive of everybody?
Yeah. And it's also a diverse cast by age and race where you don't feel, it doesn't feel like people were tokenized in that. It just feels like a naturally diverse group of characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that as someone who plays Dungeons and Dragons, the gelatinous cube is in it, which I know about only from a podcast called Get Played, where they were recently ranking the best cubes in gaming in all time, and so somebody picked the gelatinous cube.
That's awesome.
So the gelatinous cube comes on screen, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I know what that is from this podcast I listened to about video games, but it's enough of a reference. So I think the more you know about it, the more you're going to recognize things on screen.
I hear there's a very funny moment with the Speak with Dead spell, where essentially the thing, and from what I've heard of that scene, that's exactly what happens every time somebody casts the Speak with Dead spell.
Mm-hmm.
First, there's this way too long discussion about what you're going to ask the dead person. And then you start and you like ask your question and you get an answer. And inevitably somebody jumps in with a new question that you haven't talked about. And everyone in the group is like, wait, we only get 3 questions. And then somebody screws up the final question as well. And it's like, every time the Speak with Dead spell has come up in a game that I've been in, that is 100% what happens. And I hear that they'd really do that in the movie. And
they really go for it. And it's also part of the end credits scene.
Oh, nice.
So it's a running joke that is, they really lean into it. It is fantastic.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. I think, it's great to hear that it's going so well, because I think that Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast, we might get into this a little bit. They really need a win recently. They have made some like pretty severe missteps with the community.
Yeah.
And it sounds like they're trying to keep it in the sort of Marvel playbook, which is like really research tell a good story, but honor the fans. Find a way to do a good story that people who don't play D&D are going to really enjoy. And then make sure that there's enough stuff for the fans that they really feel included, but there's not so much that it just turns into fan service. And then you get the Star Wars effect of like, oh, this is actually really bad because we're just trying to do what we think the fans want.
Yeah, I don't think you need to know a thing about Dungeons and Dragons to go in and have a good time at this movie. I think the little bit I knew gave me some appreciation of what some moments were, and I know that like my friends who are DMs, like my buddy Terry, who owns a comic book shop, who is a DM for a number of different games, I know that when he goes, he's just going to be like, it'll need a 6-hour debrief afterwards.
Nice. That's awesome.
And I actually went, when I was in LA this weekend to see some comedy, and I finished a show on Friday night, and I walked up to a 24-hour diner called Norms on La Cienega, and sat next to a group of people who play Dungeons and Dragons together, who were discussing the movie, who had just come from it.
Oh my God.
And I was like, I gotta put my headphones in because I'm seeing this movie in 2 days and I don't want them to spoil it. And they were having a big, I put my headphones in because I realized they were going to spoil the movie. So I'm sure people are going and they're with their whole group. So.
Yeah, I think that's in the cards for my Friday group. I'm sure we'll make that happen at some point.
You're a few months into releasing your podcast, Upper Middlebrow.
Yep.
And I asked Jesse this, and I'll ask you, do you feel like you have landed on your definition of what Upper Middlebrow is? Yeah,
I think we have. I think we've gotten there. That it is, we we view it as accessible works of art. Doesn't have to be fiction. That's mostly what we do right now. But accessible works of art that are also high craft.
Nice.
Yeah.
And how is the creation of the podcast been for you so far?
Oh, it's been awesome. I mean, like, so Jesse and I are pretty darn old friends at this point. I think we met in probably 1999 or 2000, somewhere around there. And we've always referred to each other as our once and future roommates because we were roommates at the summer camp that we worked together for about 5 or 6 years in a row in the early aughts. And yeah, we just like really hit it off on a lot of ways. And I think we've always enjoyed talking about writing and radio and making things. And we've always tended to have like pretty good conversations about that stuff. And it's been really fun to reconnect with an old friend and like get to make something together because it really feels like it's overdue for us to kind of make something together. And it's a blast. I'm getting to learn some podcast editing stuff, which I've always wanted to learn how to do. And I think it's making me read more. It's making both of us better writers. And it's just a joy. Like, it's like any podcast. There's times where you're like, oh my God, I'm behind and this book is hard. I got to say, four Neil Stephenson novels was a lot.
Yeah, I had my year of Neil Stephenson and other dystopic future novels. Just a year when I really leaned in hard to that. And probably one of the last years of like high volume reading for me. And it is Neil Stephenson he's a real tropey guy.
That's a nice way to put that. That's a generous way to put that. I think I see where you're headed, where you're angling for, but that's a really nice way to say that.
Well, when you did your Neil Stephenson bingo for the final episode, that was perfect.
Good.
Yeah.
We had to do some editing on that because when I put the bingo card together the first time, it was like there was like 14 critical things and like 2 positive things. I think like dense and beautiful prose was one of the positives.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what the other one is, but I just got, he's quite a mind, like what an imaginative thinker.
Yeah. His world building is tremendous.
Yeah. 100%. His inability to write a female character that is like in the ballpark even is frustrating. And it took me out of the books a lot. Like, I think I'm at an age and stage in my life where I'm seeing that more rather than when I read those books first when I was either in high school or my 20s.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's tiresome.
I had a lot of moments reading them where I was like, really, this is when you're going to stop and have sex? Like, and like you are running away. Like this is now?
Yeah.
So I had a lot of those moments in almost every book. I have a pretty complicated, like after doing that, I think I have a more complicated relationship with Neil Stephenson than before. I'm happy for that. I'll probably read, like I'm interested, like, Termination Shock sounds interesting. I don't need to read the Baroque Cycle. No.
Jesse's a big fan of like Seven Eves or Reamd. But I don't know. There's other big books that I still have yet to read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read in that year, I also read, there were 2 by Daniel Suarez.
Don't know him.
He, so if Reamd is Neil Stephenson, so his, I think, is Daemon, Daemon. So it's a computer command. Book 1 kicks off when like a Bill Gates type dies. And there's a program, and Daemon, however you pronounce it, is a computer program that's set to start when like a certain criteria is met. And the criteria is a Google alert for his obituary.
Oh, wow.
And it sets off a technology apocalypse in book 1. But then book 2 is like an agricultural renaissance and utopia building after the apocalypse he starts with his death in book 1.
Huh.
And so you get to like seed saving and new agricultural communities. And I don't know, it was a really, so it was Daniel Suarez, and it was a really, it was kind of like a nice antidote after Stevenson.
Bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
We just, it's so funny when you said that you took a year of like dystopic, post-apocalyptic literature. It's starting to feel like everything is dystopic, post-apocalyptic literature. I mean, the last 3 books we did was Jennifer Egan's A Visit from the Goon Squad, which at first fronts like it's, pretty standard literary fiction, but ends in a place of like, oh, wow, the world is not okay. Jonathan Letham's The Arrest, which I think sounds a little bit like what you're describing, because there is some sort of apocalypse that then drives people back to the land. And it's this whole book set in that, like, yeah, how do we learn how to do all this stuff again? Yeah. And then Project Hail Mary, which is, yes, the world is ending, but really it's about friendship in space. Nice. And now we're doing Parable of the Sower, which we're recording on Tuesday. And I'm in that phase of like reading a book where I'm like, this is amazing. And also I have no idea what I'm going to be able to say about it other than this is amazing. So I definitely need to do some more reading before Tuesday. But yeah, I mean, I think we are in one of those like cultural moments where everybody is like getting ready for something terrible. Or
something terrible already happened.
Is already happening, and we're just the frogs. We're the frogs in the pot.
Yeah.
And I mean, that metaphor is not a great metaphor. And apparently frogs will climb out of a pot that is slowly set to boil.
Yeah.
But the figurative truth makes sense.
Yeah. And also, most of us are not going to test the metaphor. It works. I don't have to talk about where the cheese got moved, so we'll talk about boiling frogs, right? There are only so many corporate metaphors available to me.
Right? Yeah, seriously. Yeah, before you kind of run out the clock on that, and you're like, I just can't do that language anymore.
Yeah. Well, Chris, let's get into a little bit more officially talking about Dungeons and Dragons.
I mean, D&D is the way in for everybody.
Yeah.
But there has been, and I sort of alluded to this recently, earlier, there's been a real movement for people to be like, maybe we shouldn't just refer to the Kleenex as Kleenex and like be like, we like tissues. Like tissues are good. And so, it doesn't have to just be Dungeons and Dragons, even though that is going to be most people's first experience with playing tabletop role-playing games.
Yeah. Well, I always like to time travel. So what is your introduction either to Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop role-playing games? In like, was it you saw the D&D cartoon and then tried the game? Was it you like Satanic Panic? You're like, let me get in on that. Like, where does this start for you?
Yeah, around Satanic Panic for sure. So late 80s, early 90s. I remember playing the Red Box, which was first edition Dungeons and Dragons. There are 5 editions now, and we're sort of on the cusp of a 6th edition. But a lot of I'm old enough to be in a group that played the first edition of the game. There's an older introductory version that came in, it's referred to as the White Box, which is sort of like, ooh, like that's like really back there in the past.
Yeah.
like you're going to find the same people that make allusions to like, Tom Baker was the best doctor. And you're like, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, I know what era you're from. But I have the cool thing about the red box was, and this is something that it just blows my mind that Wizards of the Coast is the company that owns D&D, doesn't do more of. The red box allowed you to play the game in a solo format. It had a kind, which is brilliant because, like, first of all, I was probably like 8, 7. I remember playing it in the first house that I can remember, which would have to have been before I was 9. And there was just this really cool mechanic where it kind of asked you some questions, and you would like fill out little lines in a book with a pencil because like and it said like, use a pencil, you might want to do this again. And you kind of landed on a character. And then it had this really nifty, again, very cool mechanic where like, as you explored this particular dungeon, you would kind of uncover little map icons inside the book. It was really well done. And I just remember being like, this is amazing. This is a choose your own adventure book where I'm also getting to like decide to do things. Yeah. And I loved it. And then like a lot of under 10 players, most of my experience with D&D for the next like, I don't know, 10 years or so was mostly just creating characters. Like I would get together with my friend Garrett Rooney and we would talk about D&D and we would make characters, and every now and then we would try to play, but it's hard to play with just 2 people. But we would sort of make it work, and we spent a lot of imaginative time like making characters, making worlds, listening to so much Nine Inch Nails. There's a lot of that in that particular era. And yeah, that's how I got into it. I played a little bit through like a lot of people who learn how to play when they're under 10. By the time you hit your teenage years in the 90s, you're beginning to discover like, oh wait, I need to be quiet about this habit. Right. I can't really promote this to too many people. Played some in high school. Tried to like rope a few friends into playing D&D and was like mostly successful with that. And then, kind of took a 20-year hiatus pretty much. Kind of moved away from gaming as I went to college and post-college. And it was right around like not long after November 2016 that I was like, I need a different planet for a bit. Yeah. And I'd been curious to get back into it for a little bit. I had a few friends had recommended some role-playing game podcasts that I was like, oh wow, that's cool. I really do remember loving this. Yeah. And got back into it pretty full force. Like started running games again, started finding places to play, started branching out into some other games. Published a few D&D adventures on. Like, you can do a lot of self-publishing in the D&D world, or in the role-playing game world. So did some of that, and at this particular time, I play in a Friday game. I have a non-D&D game that happens on Wednesday nights that is really fun, and then just a few other games that sort of bubble up here and there.
And when you got back into it in 2016. Did you go back to the red box, or did you go to the 5th edition? Like, how did you pick back up?
Yeah, it's a good, I think my story is going to be probably pretty typical for people of this era. First I just went and was like, okay, what edition are we on? Because the last time I had played D&D before that was just a few games in the early aughts with Jesse's friend, Justin. Okay. Another summer camp roommate and very old friend. He and I ran a few games for him and his fiance at the time. And that was, believe it or not, edition 3.5. Okay. Yeah. Wizards of the Coast sometimes messes up its edition releases in such a way that they have to be like, hey, everybody, we messed up. here are 3 new $50 books that you have to purchase if you still want to play this game.
Oh, no.
Yeah, 3rd edition was ambitious and kind of a disaster. And
Okay.
they fixed a lot of it with what's now referred to as 3.5.
Okay.
Third edition kind of had its run from the late 90s to 2008. Usually the reason a new edition gets published is the publishing company sees its sales numbers flagging and is like, all right, let's like re-release the game.
Yeah.
And that had happened by the end of 3.5. The other thing that happens with role-playing games is as the life cycle of an edition, in order to keep people interested, you have to release new material. As you release new material, the characters get more and more powerful. And eventually the game is just completely broken.
Yeah.
Like sort of no matter what you do, it's usually called power creep, but it can also be referred to as power bloat.
Well, it's like how Superman has no natural predator, right?
Right.
That you end up with characters that can just do anything to anyone, and then there's no skill or chance left, right?
Totally. Yeah, there's no way to challenge the players. And that's one of the big sort of hot button issues in the game right now is like, is threatening character death like a good thing to do? You know, and there's definitely 2 camps in this regard. But yeah, so the 3rd edition ran to 2008. 4th edition was sort of the shortest lived one that came out in late 2008, early 2009. It's one of those games that is deeply beloved by a small portion of D&D players, and was kind of hated by a lot of everybody else. You couldn't play it without a map. Like it was very much a miniatures combat game.
Oh, okay.
And with very little narrative in between. And it was mechanically really crunchy. Some players that love that were like, this is great. This is all I want to play. But everybody else was pretty quickly like, this is really hard to do.
Yeah.
So the playtest for 5th edition came out in 2012. So 4th edition was really only around for, 2 or 3 years. And the thing that really accelerated 5th edition, and maybe you've heard of this phenomenon, is something called Critical Role. Have you heard about this at all?
I feel like Critical Role is a podcast or YouTube channel with now like celebrity dungeon masters.
Yeah, that's really close.
They have become celebrities because of their skill in Dungeons and Dragons, not that it's a celebrity coming into the game.
Totally. Yeah, that's 100% correct. They're a group of voice actors. They had been running a home game for years. And about, sort of in the time when streaming stuff started to get more popular as Twitch became like a really viable place to broadcast your own games, they said, well, let's put our game on the internet. And their first campaign started in 2014 and ran until like sort of mid-late 2017. And was just one of those like perfectly timed things. They're all good. They're all voice actors, so they're very, very good at portraying characters. The dungeon master is a guy named Matt Mercer, who's sort of one of those like human jukeboxes, like can do any voice, can do any accent, is a good actor. And these days, I mean, every Thursday night, it's not uncommon for them to get 400,000 or 500,000 viewers.
Wow.
Sitting down to watch a 4-hour D&D session. And I had like heard about that a little bit, and I watched a few episodes and was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And that really powered my desire to return to the game. And I think there's definitely like a little 5th edition is the most popular version of D&D that's ever been released. Most people are like, yeah, because that's the version that was out when Critical Role happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then are you able to give the like layman's explanation of what happened this year with the copyright, and it seemed I heard about it on TikTok, like, and it seemed, and the gamers that I follow on Twitter, it seemed like somehow they were really messing with the fan created art and storytelling, and somehow coming down with the copyright in a way that was like antithetical to the community standards. Is that what happened?
Yeah, totally. You've got the broad strokes of it for sure. I'll do. You said you're into time traveling, so we're going to do a little time traveling.
Thank you.
We're going to go back to the early aughts. This is when 3.5 is out.
Mm-hmm.
Wizards of the Coast realizes that they can't release enough good content.
Mm-hmm.
That they're getting actually outproduced by small third-party publishers.
Okay.
So the 3.5 books are good, but the art's a little like okay, and the layout's a little okay, and a few other third-party publishers start releasing really good, really beautiful stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
that is happening within the universe of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Within like the canon.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
And Wizards, in a moment of like really non-corporate, amazing sort of belief in their fan base, released something called the OGL, the Open Gaming License.
Okay.
Where essentially you can use the whatever it's called, the systems resource document for the game. You can use that to create your own content and sell your own content.
Okay.
And there's some things that are off limits, like some pieces of Wizards of the Coast intellectual property that they're like, you can't use that thing. You can't use mind flayers. You can't use beholders. There's a few things that you kind of have to stay away from. But what it did was that it suddenly really expanded the number of things you could do with the game. And it really raised the quality of the supplements that were getting released. And so it brought more people into the game because like all of a sudden there's a Doctor Who version of Dungeons and Dragons that like somebody sort of like cobbled together and uses the rule set. And now people are like, oh my God, that's so cool. Like, and they're basically using the D&D rule set to play whatever kind of universe they want to play.
Okay. And this is, so at the time professionally, I was working in social media at a marketing agency, but in a role where I was like educating companies and decision makers about what even was an online community. And so this is at the moment in time where Creative Commons is becoming more understood. So like Flickr and YouTube, the use of Creative Commons. There's obviously always been zines and remixing and taping culture, but once it became digital and people were able to, like, memes started moving so fast and remixing things, and that became such a prevalent part of like how online communities created with each other. So it seems like it's part of that Creative Commons open source, RSS feed moment in time. Yeah, totally. And it was dreamed up by the people at the top at Wizards of the Coast. And they really intended it when the original language was that this is a perpetual worldwide, I think, unrestricted license. The word they didn't put in that caused all of the hullabaloo this year, they didn't put in the word irrevocable. And so we fast forward a bunch of years. I'm not quite sure when Hasbro acquired Wizards of the Coast. I don't have that in my brain. Yeah, that was a surprising part of the opening credits of the movie today. It was like Hasbro presents, and I was like, these weren't toys first. Why it's not He-Man? Like, why is Hasbro in the picture? So Hasbro acquires them.
Yeah, I think probably sometime in the aughts. Dungeons and Dragons has been killing it for Hasbro recently. I think Wizards of the Coast is responsible for something like 20 to 25% of Hasbro's revenue, but in some figuring, almost as much as 70% of their profit. Yeah, so Wizards is essentially is Hasbro's kind of golden goose at the moment, and has like quarter after quarter of growth and stuff like that. Like a lot of corporate stuff, Hasbro's been going through some leadership changes, and a lot of people who I think probably don't understand the game. We saw a lot of rumblings about this last year. Some of the higher ups at Hasbro saying things like, the Dungeons and Dragons brand is under-monetized. And you're like, oh, that's the bad
I
phrase.
got some Boston Consultant alumni in there.
Yeah, of course.
Not to pick on one place over another, but some private equity, BCG people.
Absolutely.
Sounds like, yeah.
Yeah. And essentially what they tried to do was they tried to revoke the OGL. Basically just like take it away. They're like, we're going to have this other thing in place. It's going to be great. If you make more than $750,000, you have to give us a quarter of your profit, which is like business ending for anybody. Like 25% of your profit margin is absurd. And it's a bummer because there's a small handful of companies that probably make over that. And then the rest of us are, people like me who publish, a few D&D adventures and make $100 off of it over the course of whatever. There's a lot of really restrictive language on it. You were going to, everything that you published, Wizards got they received a license from you. So they had the license to your intellectual property forever.
Cool.
Yeah, I know, right? And in a moment of kind of community amazingness, like the D&D community was like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
There was a big movement to cancel your D&D Beyond subscription, which is D&D Beyond is basically the online portal for Wizards of the Coast. And they got 50,000 people to... Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
With that's where your character sheets and maps and things like that kind of live instead of in a folder on your desk.
And all of your digital book content, because when you can purchase a digital book at D&D Beyond for, $30 instead of $50, but most people will buy the physical book as well. So every time there's a book purchase, you're looking at like an $80 purchase.
Yeah.
And really you don't own anything that is hosted through a subscription site. And so there's no reason that it couldn't go away. But yeah, about 50,000 people canceled their subscriptions. And
that was in the course of like a week or a couple of days, it seemed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Wizards and Hasbro didn't handle it very well. They like a series of real PR missteps. But then eventually they backed off completely, and they turned 5th edition into a Creative Commons 4.0 license, which is basically now it's the world's. Like the 5th edition rule set, they can't ever take that back because it's in the Creative Commons now. Everybody can use it. My cynical take is that we are getting another edition of D&D late next year.
And it's going to be locked down.
Yeah. I bet it's going to be, they keep saying that it's going to be backwards compatible. It's not. Everything they've shown us so far is that it's not going to be backwards compatible. This happened with 4th edition. Wizards tried to do this with 4th edition. It was a disaster. Nobody published under the GSL, which was called the Game Systems License. And 4th edition kind of tanked. So the nice thing is that with 5th edition in the Creative Commons, there are now 3 or 4 other versions of 5th edition D&D that other people have like tweaked or modified. made a better version of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And we have those forever now. So, the next time I run a D&D campaign, I'll probably be using, there's a version called Level Up 5e. So I'll probably use that. But it's been a bumpy year for in the D&D world.
Yeah. Thank you. That helps. I follow just enough people that I could kind of piece together what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
But couldn't quite wrap my head around it. And even when I read articles, I was like, I still don't fully understand how this all works, but that is really helpful.
There's a really good journalist who broke almost all of the stuff named Linda Codega. And if you just searched for her or put it in the show notes, she was really the one who was like at the forefront of all of this in January and February, and did some amazing work to get the story out there and to get it noticed.
So what about other, because you said that specifically, like it's not all D&D for you.
Yeah.
So what are other role-playing tabletop games that are on your calendar?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the reason that D&D shouldn't be on everybody's primary shelf is it's a really swingy system. And when you start talking about game design, you start talking about what is the story you're trying to tell? And do your game mechanics support that kind of story? The way that D&D works is you roll a 20-sided die, you add some kind of modifier, and the dungeon master has set some sort of target. And if you're above that, you succeed, and if you're below that, you fail. The problem with a 20-sided die is that it is not a standard distribution of numbers. Like, you roll a 10 just as often as you roll a 20 or a 1. So it's just a 5% that you're going to get any particular number. And there's no Gaussian curve that sort of sets up like a bump in the middle. And so you have all sorts of hilarious...
Would there be with other die?
You can do it with dice combinations. And that's what a lot of other games have gone to, that instead of rolling a single die, you'll roll combinations of dice, which then do start setting up a distribution curve where you've got the middle numbers you see more of. So if it's say it's a game where your resolution mechanic is 2 6-sided dice. You're going to roll a 7 so many more times than you're going to roll a 12 because there's so many more ways.
To get to 7. Okay.
Right.
Now I understand.
And that's why craps works. Like, that's why like dice games that rely on rolling 7s are popular games, because that's the number you're going to hit more often. So the problem with D&D is, and this is never going to change because it's been around for 50 years and this is what they're doing. You have stupid outcomes like the barbarian with the 20 strength, like just rolls a 2 and can't knock down the door. And the wizard is like, let me give it a shot, and rolls a 20 and is like looks at the DM and is like, please describe how awesome my door breaking is. And you just end up in this that's like, it's unsatisfying from a narrative point of view. And so and a lot of D&D's mechanics are like that, like this sort of binary, if like you do it or you don't. It's not good storytelling. I mean, like that, if that's how we experienced movies, the protagonist is like facing an obstacle and it's either a yes, no, that's not exciting. Then, we miss all of the things that happen as Luke is trying to like shoot the proton torpedoes into the Death Star. There's a whole bunch of complications that, yes, he's successful here, but then something bad happens. And a lot of games are like sort of working towards, changing that or moving in that direction. There's there's a system called Forged in the Dark that came after a game called Blades in the Dark, which is a system. It's a D6 based system. So when I say D6, it's 6-sided die. D8 would be an 8-sided die, so on and so forth. And it's very simple. If you're pretty good at something, you might be rolling 2 6-sided dice. Okay. And you just take the highest of whatever you roll. Okay. If you get a 6, you do it. Success. If you get a 4 or 5, it's a partial success. So you do it, but there's a consequence. Like, that's the thing. And the game very nicely sort of sets up a bunch of other things that can happen. So it's like a complication occurs. You lose the opportunity. You suffer harm. So there's a series of like suggestions that the game has for you as the GM to do something with that. And what's really cool about that way, like if you're rolling, you're going to get a lot of 4s and 5s, because if you're rolling multiple dice, you're going to get a lot of 3s, 4s, and 5s in there. And so you end up in this kind of escalating thing where you do it. And so it's like, sweet, you get the door open. Oh, you know what? There's a guard taking a nap on the other side of the door. And so you fixed the big problem, which is getting through the door, but then there's like another thing you have to deal with. Okay. And so the tension ratchets in a way that we're familiar with from watching, these kinds of movies and this kind of content that we're really into. So that's a really wonderful system. It has a bunch of spin-offs. There's one called Scum and Villainy, which is basically a Star Wars spin-off. Yeah. There's an amazing one called Band of Blades, where the setup to the game is like, this very iconic standoff between humanity and the forces of the dead. But the way this game starts is, we had that fight and humanity lost. Like, so you're starting at after a really bad ending. And the entire game is you sort of fight this kind of retreating action across a country, trying to save your company and as many people along the way from this encroaching zombie horde. It's very dark. It came out in early 2020. Ooh. I know.
So perfect or terrible timing.
Yeah, people were either leaning into that one or leaning way far away from it. That's it. That's a game that I really admire quite a bit for its reliance on focusing on narrative and returning narrative control to the players. A big a stereotypical thing that you might have heard in the D&D world, a longtime trope is rocks fall, you die, which is the mean dungeon master who is pissed off about the way things are going and just kills the players out of hand. Which is a very 9-year-old way of doing things. And the games that I really enjoy playing are the ones that push that narrative control back over to the players. Because these games are about doing awesome things. And I really like how games other than Dungeons and Dragons really try to focus on the players as the people who are driving the story.
A friend of mine works on a game called Eclipse Phase.
Oh, Eclipse Phase is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Adam Jury and I have been internet friends for since the earliest days of Twitter.
Nice. Yeah, Eclipse Phase I haven't played, but it is a cyberpunkish kind of thing. And what's cool about it is it's very physical body non-specific. You can totally be a piece of software that chooses to interact with the world in a certain way. There's that character in Snow Crash who's essentially basically has a car as his wheelchair. And that's a very Eclipse Phase-y kind of thing. Where you might be, you might be a body in a wheelchair that is, this amazing machine. Eclipse Phase is really cool. It is crunchy. It's a crunchy game. When I say crunchy, it usually means sort of heavy on mechanics, but it also does a really nice job of being a good storytelling game as well.
Yeah. They do a lot of, I feel like, activism around piracy. They're like, go ahead, pirate it. Download the PDF. And you can download the PDF for free, pay what you want. You can order the printed book. I've backed some of their Kickstarters just because I adore Adam and I want to support him, even though I've never played. But everything I've learned about why it's okay to let people pirate your work as a way of building a fan base and a user base for a game like this has been from him and from their team. And it's been fascinating to watch from the sidelines over the years.
There's a lot of games will take that approach where you can get the PDF for free and then you got to buy, like, if you want the physical book, you buy it. There's a game that I'm very hot on is a game called Lancer, which is, it's funny. You would, with my focus on narrative, you'd think I wouldn't be as stoked on Lancer as I am. It is one of those games that when you're doing a fight, 4 rounds could take 4 hours. Okay. It's a lot. Like, there's a lot of like figuring things out and like going to the rule book. But it's the world that they have envisioned for Lancer is this kind of amazing post-scarcity utopia in space.
All right.
Where like this fascist kind of galactic-wide government has fallen about 500 years before the start of the story. And the galaxy is trying to be governed by another government called Union, which can either sound great or sound like really alarming. Yeah. And they're basically trying to export utopia to the rest of the galaxy. Okay. Which is a really cool setup because they generally do have good intentions. They want to preserve like unity and identity and like acceptance. But you bump into planets that have never heard of Union before and are like, we were fine. We don't want your utopia. And so there's ways to generate really, really interesting story conflict out of this world. It's a really, really incredible galaxy. The work that they did on the world building was just amazing. And the art is one of those where you're like, you read the core book or you download the free PDF and you're like, oh, I want to live in this world. This is amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if someone was they're inspired by this conversation, how do people get started playing role-playing games? Like what's the door right now?
Yeah, I would hope that the door is still go to your friendly local gaming store. Usually a good time to do that is going to be sometime in the evening, which is when like a lot of like the tabletop games happen. And because people are getting off work or something like that. And, screw up your courage, but go to the person at the front desk and be like, hey, I hear some cool things about this. How do I get started here? Yeah. Because every store is going to be offering a different series of things. Dungeons and Dragons has something called the Adventurers League, which is not a perfect product. Okay. But what's great about the Adventurers League is that your character is portable. So you kind of make a character under the Adventurers League rules. And then ostensibly you can play that character at any Adventurers League table in the world. Okay. As long as you're playing at a table that is in the multiverse of the original character's creation. Okay. So like if you make a Forgotten Realms Adventurers League character, you can't play it in Eberron, for example, which is going to sound like gobbledygook to your listeners, but like there's a planar problem there. Your character just can't get there. And that's a really good way to start because a lot of Adventurers League tables save space for beginners. And it's usually a first come, first serve system. So if you get a spot at a table, you just go and sit down and the DM is like, hey, here's what we're doing tonight. Can I see your character sheet? and just kind of has a look at your character, make sure it's Adventurers League legal, and that's a great way to start.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good place. Most of these games have really good Discord support.
Mm-hmm.
So like Blades in the Dark has an amazing Discord server. Lancer has one called pilot.net. That's an amazing Discord server. D&D has a very good Discord server as well. And those places are really good communities for being like, hey, I'm new. And usually they will have channels that are developed to people that are new.
Nice.
And be like, answer questions about how to get started. But yeah, I would really hope people would go and patronize their friendly local gaming store. That's a good place to start.
Yeah, and it's so different starting to play these games today than, we played, like I said, I played in high school. Briefly, we played Paranoia, I think was the game.
It's a great game.
Yeah.
It's a great game. So very dark.
Very dark. I don't think we played longer than 2 nights. Like I don't think we finished a campaign, or I realized I didn't want to hang out with that part of the marching band. I don't remember why I stopped playing Paranoia, but it was very dark.
It's a dark game. It's a very funny game, but it's a very dark game.
Yeah. And then in 2001, it was my last year in Durango, Colorado. A friend DM'd a game for us, but at the time I had 3 part-time jobs. I swing shift at Walmart. I was a waitress. I was managing a rape crisis hotline in Durango.
Whoa, it's a lot.
If you want to not love your small mountain town, manage the rape crisis hotline.
Oh God, yeah.
So my friend Emrys would come over, and there were 5 of us playing, and I was so exhausted. And he would start telling the story, and I would just fall asleep every time. He was such a good storyteller, and he painted such a vivid picture. And I saw all of it asleep on my couch. And then sometimes they'd nudge me awake to roll for something. So I wasn't the most engaged player. Mm-hmm. That's on me.
But and then another place to discover new games. There's a podcast that comes out of Chicago, the whole podcast network at this point, called One Shot. And every week, well, not every week, every 3 or 4 weeks, they'll start a new game in a new system, and with a rotating cast of characters, and really great. And the guy who runs that name is James D'Amato. He's sort of tabletop role-playing game royalty, runs these really great, again, very inclusive, wonderful tours of games that are not D&D.
Okay.
And that's a really good way to get exposed to different systems, because there's a galaxy of amazing games out there. Really simple one-page games. There's a very hilarious game called Everyone is John, where one person has to play John and all the other players play competing parts of his slowly disintegrating psyche. And those parts of his psyche are trying to get control of John. And it's sort of in the vein of Paranoia. It can be a dark game, but there's so many amazing systems like that. And the great thing about these games is it's a way that frees kids and adults, sometimes together, to tell stories in a collaborative way, and to be silly, and to be inventive, and to be creative, and not be hobbled by trying to look a certain way or be a certain way, the way that we are IRL.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about this stuff.
Yeah. That's great. I've got, I think, 4 of my nephews, 4 of 5 are all active D&D players, and role playing. They all have different groups. We've talked about doing a game. One of my nephews was going to run a game for Christmas this year, and then there was a blizzard and it didn't happen. So we're trying to figure out, it's kind of a hard one across 4 time zones to figure out, can we do a Zoom one where all of the grown-ups are new to it and all of the nibblings are not. They're the,
Kids,
So I
kids develop system mastery in a way that adults do not.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we talk about it and we're trying to, I think probably next Christmas or next major holiday get together is our next big chance to really like make a go of it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I play a somewhat regular game with my niece and my nephew, and like I said, it's just one of the joys of my life. Is like we play via Zoom, but it's only 2 time zones that we have to coordinate.
Yeah,
not 4.
And are they in the same house together?
Yeah, they're both same house. Niece is 11 and nephew is like 13, 14. So it's pretty.
So they don't have driver's licenses yet.
Yeah, totally right. Yeah, this will get a little more complicated 2 years from now.
Yeah, just my youngest nephew is the only one who can't drive. So we're also like very mobile, adults and young people. Is there a myth about role playing that you wish you could shatter?
That's a great question. Is there, happily the myth that it's just for like shut in nerds is going away. That's slowly getting eroded, which is really good. I'm really happy about that. Is there still a remaining myth about role-playing games that I'd like to get rid of? I think the one, if we can set aside that it's just for shut-in nerds, if we can set that one aside, because I really think that perception is going away.
I think so.
I think the one that I would really like to change is inside the role-playing game, the sort of community, that there's a right or a wrong way to do this stuff. You bump into people in the community that will really get bent out of shape if something is being done in a way that they're not used to. And I guess this is also a complaint about the culture at large too. But that can lead to some real problems. One of the reasons that 4th edition was so crunchy was there's this leaked document in the late aughts where like, somebody, some higher up at Wizards of the Coast was like, we have to design these games so obnoxious people can't ruin them. And there is a real thread of like, I'm going to figure out how to break this game player. And like, it's got to be done this way. And aren't I clever? And you're like, yeah, you're clever. You're also an asshole.
Yeah.
Like, you're also like rejecting the premise of the story that we're trying to tell together. So if I could wave a magic wand and change one thing about the role-playing game industry, it would be that.
Yeah. But there's 2 competing podcast interviews that this has made me think of. So one is an episode of Newcomers, which is Lauren Lapkus and Nicole Byer, where they watch movies, they watch franchises that both of them have missed.
Oh, awesome.
So it started with Star Wars. Neither of them had ever really seen any Star Wars media. And they came up in improv and they were kind of getting sick of improv dudes being like, what do you mean you don't know who Darth Vader is? And I want to say they did a Lord of the Rings. They did 20 episodes on Lord of the Rings and like all the associated, the media.
Oh my God.
And they did an episode of role-playing, a Lord of the Rings role-play.
Okay, yeah.
And it's them learning how to do it as 2 women improvisers. And they have a podcast DM who's pretty popular, I think, comes on to lead the game and teach them about it. And it is very much in good faith. And at the end, they're like, wait a minute, that was just like a directed improv scene.
Yeah.
Like you gave us the parameters and then we got to talk to each other and get in character and then we'd pause and roll a dice and then we'd be in character again. And it's a really fun introduction to role-playing games with 2 funny women who don't know shit about shit.
Oh, I got to go listen to that. That sounds amazing.
It's a great episode.
Okay.
And then this week on Love It or Leave It, there was an author who has coined the phrase neo-kayfabe.
Oh my God.
To talk about the Republican Party.
Oh my God. That's amazing.
And for me, when you were talking about there's like obnoxious players who just want to break the game, I was like, oh, that's neo-kayfabe. That is like everything's in bad, like nothing is in good faith. It's all in bad faith.
Yeah.
And it's all trying to break the system or pretend like the system doesn't even exist.
The mindset that I see behind it most of the time is a desire to be better than, you know, and, you know, like I'm going to do this in such a way that like I win and I'm always like, great, you won, but now the game is over. Like,
right.
This thing that we were trying to create as a group is screwed.
Yeah.
And you can really see that as a central plank of the Republican Party. Yeah, there is a lot of that. And it's, and I really wish it would go away.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm going to look up the name of the author real quick. Josie Reisman. And the book is Ringmaster, Vince McMahon and the Unmaking of America.
Yeah, that sounds very apt.
Yeah. So I would recommend those as like 2 interviews to listen to.
I will definitely, The Newcomer sounds amazing, and I do like
it's so fun.
I do like all the Pod Save America stuff, so I'm sure I'll go listen to Love It or Leave It.
Yeah. Chris, where can people find you on the internet, is there anything you'd like to promote? Sure.
Yeah. I would love to promote the podcast that I do with my dear friend Jesse Dukes, Upper Middlebrow. You can find us on Instagram at Upper Middlebrow or on Twitter at Upper Middle Pod. And then on Twitter, I'm at Chris Bagg. On Instagram, I'm at Christopher Bagg. You will get a strange mix in those places of nerdy endurance sports and tabletop role-playing game stuff.
Outstanding.
Yeah, a nerd through and through with some jock dressing.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for being with me this week.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Finding Favorites with Leah Jones. Please make sure to subscribe and drop us a 5-star review on iTunes. Now, go out and enjoy your favorite things.